Today with us is our friend Matt G. How you doing, Matt?
Pretty good, pretty good. How are you?
I am doing awesome. So today I wanted to bring you on and talk to you about disruptive innovation. Which is a theory, a business model based off of Clayton Christensen's book that he came out with in the mid '90s, um, and called the Innovator's Dilemma. So I want to know, like, reading up on this and going through this, I want you to talk a little bit about what disruptive innovation is and kind of how, and later on we'll get into how it pertains to Clover Health, ticker CLOV. Um, but it's an interesting, obviously it's probably one of the most highly sought after business models there is right now as far as what people are following and whatnot. But can you kind of give us a quick synopsis on uh, what disruptive innovation is?
Yeah, absolutely. So Clayton Christensen um, is a Harvard business professor. So when you want to educate the best, you have to have kind of a theory, or at least be teaching something for the best of the best, and it has to be miles and miles upon others, and it has to be something that's not very intuitive, right? Because if it's something that's too intuitive, then why even bother to pay the exorbitant tuition and all that stuff.
Mhm.
But yet it's all based upon a book that he wrote in the mid 90s that's very influential, but probably a little less known to retail investors these days. But why is it influential? Well, because it kind of gives a theory about how disruption takes place in industries, and it gives predictions. So that's the key thing about theories is they are judged based upon the accuracy of their predictions. And so he kind of built it upon a lot of these different case studies in the past of how, um, uh, like in the printer space, how Xerox was disrupted by Canon and so on and so forth. Um, but the key thing of what he describes to be a disruptive company are that it's simple, it's accessible, and it's affordable. The company being that creates a an existing product or service that is currently not priced for the masses. So I think a classic example would be back in the days when we had IBM mainframes and we didn't have personal
Yeah.
computers yet. Well, the mainframe computer, and this is his example, right? They had like 50, 60% margins. And it takes 2 years of support that goes with it. So, if you bought one and you have employees that need troubleshooting or whatever, you need to pay for, the service and all the troubleshooting, right? So it ratchets up costs and so on and so forth. And so the next iteration is, okay, let's improve next year, the next generation of mainframes. So what do? You increase the performance and you jack up the price, right? Because that's intuitively what you should do as a manager of this business. And it's not until that uh, companies like Apple um, made the Macintosh and created a personal computer that has very low margins, doesn't look like it's going to be successful, but
It didn't take up your whole room.
yeah, exactly. It didn't take up your whole room, and it's affordable for the masses. And it's not about performance at that time. It's really just about buying this toy and being part of a creation process within digitalization.
Well, yeah, and a really good example is the automobile. I mean, when Mercedes first came out with their car, um, it was too expensive. People
Yeah.
couldn't afford it. It was a luxury item. It was only for the rich. It didn't disrupt anything because the masses couldn't afford it. They're still running around with their horse and buggies and carriages, and you've got the rich people driving around a Mercedes. It
Right.
wasn't really until 1908 when Henry Ford came out with his car that was affordable. It was ready to be made for the masses. I mean, anybody could buy it at that time, and you could only get it in black.
Correct. Yeah.
As long as it was black. But that's always a good example that I like to use for this, because everybody thought that when the first automobile came out, that was the disruptive innovation, but it wasn't, because nobody could afford it. So it wasn't really disrupting anything. And until Henry Ford was able to make it in the masses and make it affordable for everybody to be able to buy one, that was the disruptive innovation, and that's what changed the time, and that's what changed what we are now.
I think exactly. So the theory does say that it's not necessarily the technology itself that is disruptive, but it's actually there is a disruptive process where
It's a process.
where there is a company that's kind of the heart and soul of that process, because it's not just the company and the production and all that stuff. There's a business philosophy around it, which ends up creating these value networks that are on the peripheries. So it's not necessarily just Ford making a good but affordable car, but it's also just the value network is actually uh, everything that's around it. So like the roads, it's a platform in itself. And the business philosophy was also that Ford wanted to pay his workers, a good enough salary to where they could buy their own products, and essentially create this kind of feedback loop of, okay, well, it's not about making a great deal of margin or profitability in the short term. It's about creating this value network that enforces profitability in the long term.
Well, yeah, and absolutely. And you get into some of these companies like one of the ideas that he had, that Christensen called the technology mudslide hypothesis, which basically says, okay, this company's been around, they're established, they've been around a long time, but they're not keeping up with the technology to keep the business growing.
Yes.
So then another company comes in with technology that's surpassed any technology that they have. It may take them longer to get to where they need to be, but at some point, this other company is going to fall way behind and ultimately possibly fail because they can't keep up with the technology.
Yeah. So like an incumbent company, right, is crafted to perfection for its current business needs and for its current customer needs. It hires the best, and it has crafted the best pricing mechanism and all that stuff in order to be successful and competitive and to remain and stay the winner. So it is not very well incentivized to go out and create and craft a new product to disrupt itself. This is what in the industry of finance, what they call self-cannibalizing your business units, right? You wouldn't go out there just to create a cheaper, better product, so then you just lose margins the next year. That's not very intuitive. But if there is a potential for another company to go out there and create a successful, better brand and better product and better service, and they're going after your customers, your best interest as an incumbent is to go out and destroy them, right? And
of course,
and the case study is, and this is the prediction of, Innovator's Dilemma, is to go out and do that. However, the reason why disruptive companies continue to disrupt and incumbents continue to be disrupted and fail at the end, right? Again, this is all a process. This is like a long 10, 20-year process that even if incumbents want to destroy and kill an insurgent disruptive company, they will still fail. Why? It's because the disruptive companies, they go out to the fringes, where incumbents will not follow. So to give you an, for example,
Low end, less demanding customers.
exactly, low end customers. The theory goes with Christensen that disruptive companies always begin on the low end of the market.
Mm-hmm.
These are the customers that the high end, the ones who are the incumbents, they do not have any interest in serving. So it's essentially a market that's untapped, but yet it's also a market that's kind of forced onto people in some sense. If it is a good and service that needs to be out there, right? That's kind of mandated in a sense.
Right. And that's the thing, like them going after this, and I don't want to call it low hanging fruit, but it's obviously they go after the low end because they're going to be able to get these customers who have yet been able, they can't afford what the product is or the service is or whatever the case may be. You know what I mean? So they're down here basically just hanging on.
Mm-hmm.
And then these disruptive companies come in and they start grabbing these people because they're offering their service or product at a lower price point that these people can afford. And as time grows and as time goes and the quality of the product or service gets better and better and better, then that's obviously going to start meeting demand. They're going to start having the demand that other people are now going to start getting in. Other investors are going to start getting in because they're going to see that the quality of the product or services has grown substantially over time. And one thing that I wanted to do was put this. I wanted to share this screen just so we have an idea of kind of what this is. So, I mean, this is basically your performance and your timeline here. And then this is where they start at. They low quality use, their medium quality use. This is obviously your disruptive technology, high quality and most demanding use. So as time goes on and your performance gets better and better, then obviously the demand becomes greater and greater.
Yep, absolutely. So this is where we actually get into the technology piece. First, all we were really talking about was just that that a business is just disruptive, right? And disruptive does not necessarily need to have, a technology feature. Disruptive could just be something that's just very simple, where you took something and just made it very, accessible to the masses, right? It's like taking the mainframe computer into a personal computer, and you've created just, it doesn't have to be wildly profitable. It just has to create a masses shift, right? And create that kind of accessibility, affordability, and it's simple to use. When you bring in the technology aspect of it, then that technology just means improvement over time. And so exactly what you were just showing is that, a disruptive company that has kind of taken a monopoly over the low end part of the market,
Mm-hmm.
it now needs to find a new use case and a new frontier for where it's going to grow. I mean, clearly, you could say that it can continue to grow internally, which is to continue to increase its capacity, right? And as it continues to increase its capacity, you have to then think about what are the consequences of having a better technology, at a steady rate. Because when you apply a technology curve on anything, what you're essentially doing is, okay, it's going to double, in performance, cost of performance every 18 months or something like Moore's law, or something just a little less aggressive, which would be 15% improvement in cost of performance and any kind of manufacturing process, like
Right.
solar cells or something like that, 15% year over year cost performance ratio. And so these TikTok incremental improvements, they're just they're really just part of this sustaining innovation cycle. So if you have any kind of technology, you get this kind of improvement. Disruptive technologies, however, they are on a different trajectory, simply because they are this type of sustaining technology, which is improvement year over year, right? But they have a growth element that's associated with it, which is that they can go and encroach onto the high end customers within that industry. So, I mean, just not,
Well,
not to, yeah, go ahead.
and and that's it. I mean, once because as far as Clover Health is concerned, Clove, you, and these disruptors, once they're able to gain a foothold into the customer segment part of it, at that point, and now they're going to start looking for profit margin. They're going to start looking to grow in that aspect,
Right.
but with the technology that Clover Health has, for example, with the Clover Assistant and their AI technology, right now what they're trying to do is they're trying to gain the foothold in the customer segment part of the business. And once they've got that foothold, now they have the ability to branch out and start growing into profit margins and making money and making the business profitable at that point, which is,
Yeah,
kind of goes with the graph that I put up earlier.
precisely. So, this is kind of the first part of the journey of Clover is kind of understanding this theoretical framework of, Vivek says that he kind of started Clover because he's trying to solve this huge dimensional problem, which is healthcare affordability, right?
Right.
There's a lot of irrational aspects to healthcare, or just, I guess, not irrational. These have been very well rationalized, but they were compromises that were made within a legacy economic system. But just to give you, just to kind of talk about Clover finding this customer segment, right, and kind of solving the profit margin aspect of this. It's kind of already well defined in a sense in healthcare, because what has been described in probably Christiansen's latest book, The Innovator's Prescription, is that healthcare has kind of moved from kind of intuitive-based healthcare to evidence-based healthcare, and now we're getting into this personalized, precision-based healthcare that's kind of well understood, but it's not well financially incentivized. Just to give you an example, like you go to a doctor and they prescribe these tests, right? Just to help understand better, your, the patient's, personal medical history, and just kind of really figure out what the disease actually is. And the insurance company kind of denies this test because it's like, this isn't, medically relevant or whatever. Basically, they want to avoid paying these claims, so that this aspect of it is not very well financialized to progress, even though this is kind of where the science is kind of indicating, right? But if you grasp the understanding that this is just really a game theory phenomenon, and Clover decides to be a little bit more enlightened about it, and have the patient's claims data and everything to back that up, then it can actually create a new frontier of efficiency where you could actually create new knowledge, create new evidence-based knowledge about the human health dimension, right? The human condition. And I think, even though it's a relatively small segment of the population, it's demographically diverse, and it is, every year, I believe this same curve of technological innovation is improving, and their understanding is improving. And so I, I think a very good equilibrium point will come out of this, because the value network that is being created are physicians that are empowered by well curated patient history. And
Right.
I think
And
fixing those.
And that's extremely important.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you why. So last year, for example, and I won't go too deep into this, but so last year, my wife was diagnosed with lupus, which I think a lot of people are nowadays, but it was after both of us had gotten COVID back in February. But it took them like 6 months to come up with the diagnosis. And I was seeing, rheumatologist after rheumatologist, and nobody could figure out what it was. And, with any of your autoimmune diseases, it's so weird that they can't pinpoint these better than they can when they're specialists in this. And I think that's what's gone on with today's society, with today's medical field, healthcare, because you're looking at charts, and there's been times where, my wife was given a prescription that the doctor prescribed, didn't look over charts to see if she was taking any other medication, and the medication that he prescribed to her could actually have been fatal if she had taken that medication. And who found it was the pharmacist. So when she went down there to pick up the medication, she's like, well, I'm not giving you this medication. And she ended up calling the doctor, the pharmacist did, and basically bitched him out for not paying attention to the charts and what medication she was taking. And of all people, the pharmacists, who I think are people that I think we take for granted, and they're actually extremely important in the healthcare industry. But it just blows my mind that here we are, we've got, my wife going to get this prescription, not knowing to her, because she don't know what the hell she's taking. She's just doing what the doctor tells her to get. And she goes, and pharmacist is like, ain't happening. Not giving it to you. I'm calling your doctor right now. And she did. And, what's he going to say? I'm sorry. And that's pretty much where we're at with that. But it's just so interesting that, here's how archaic the healthcare industry is in the grand scheme of things.
I think what is archaic about it is that it's not well incentivized to do what medical knowledge has advanced to already. What we already know. I mean, we know that medical knowledge is increasing year after year, but we don't feel it, right?
Right.
And so it's really lost upon us, like as a society. Why are we paying all these tax dollars just to see no evidence that there's progress in human health year after year? In fact, we're seeing worse and worse health outcomes, and it doesn't make sense because we're pumping the system full of money, and it's not coming out, like in terms of the outcomes, right? And
right, absolutely. And and the problem is I don't want to say doctors are lazy, but they kind of are.
They're constrained. They're constrained, right?
And
because you only have 10 minutes to see a patient. So
right.
What can you do, right?
And they've got so much stuff going on. And I think, what Clover Assistant is going to do, it's going to be equivalent to putting a bunch of doctors in the same room at the same time and going over their advances, their ideas, and things like that. And I think that's what's extremely important to me for what Clover Health or the Clover Assistant is going to be about. Because instead of, you can't get I mean, come on. I mean, you can't get doctors, a room full of doctors in the same place at the same time for any amount of time because they're
Right.
busy.
Yeah. So consensus gathering is a very important part of uh, 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 consensus gathering is a very important part in a patient's journey in
Hmm.
discovering his or her diagnosis, right? You have to get a second, third, fourth opinion, whatever.
Right.
If you are well financially endowed, you can seek the second, third, fourth opinion, right?
Sure.
But if you're not, the first opinion is all you got, and you. What is critical about the system is that you suffer from your health is in jeopardy over a bad decision making on the first opinion, but it's not necessarily the fault of the doctor. It is the fault that the doctor is, you know, not presented with all the evidence in that first blink of an eye,
Correct.
um, within the first 10 minutes of visiting during the physician's visit. And I think what you mentioned is there's a moral equivalent when you can provide the well-curated patient history to the doctor. So then, in the words of Andrew Toy, so the physician could well quarterback your wellness,
Exactly.
or your diagnosis, right? Because
Exactly. No, exactly.
yeah, because I mean, ultimately, the um, the physician being the quarterback, so to speak, they have the skills, the knowledge to throw that ball. You don't have that ability or the knowledge to
Right.
throw the ball down the end zone, but it's the decision making ability of the doctor of how what the patient's history is presented to them at the time of how well they can inform the diagnosis part of it. They're good at just making the decision on once once it's kind of presented to them what the diagnosis is, then they can go out and just like these are the next steps, right? And that's the execution part. um, the diagnosis part is a very, very interesting part of it where it's a little bit too advanced for us to talk as just retail investors.
Sure.
But it is, like you mentioned, there is a Dr. House aspect to it where you need to have one person who's kind of like making the decision and a bunch of doctors just like arguing about what are the
Right.
other probabilities out there, right? And that's actually a very key thing about Clover Assistant, that it's not meant to be 100% accurate. It's
No.
meant to just provide that second opinion within 5 minutes of interacting with the software.
Right.
And that is the value that can be generated in eliminating care gaps within a patient's medical history.
Yeah.
So
Because even if you, have a room full of doctors and they're all giving their opinion, they're not going
mhm.
to be 100% accurate.
Yeah,
I don't care what anybody says. I mean, they have the knowledge, they have the education, but the human body is more complex than we
and
know.
now we've discovered that genes play a very, very specific role in our own personal healthcare trajectory.
Right.
There a person is almost based upon their genetics, almost predetermined to have a certain level of wellness, and
Correct.
that and it's not like you can be perfectly healthy sometimes, but you can be the best of what your genes have made out to be, and um, and it's I think there is a lot of room for improvement. So what Clover is really trying to um, I guess not the word monetize, but I think just to turn it into like a financial value add phrase. What it's trying to capture in terms of its value is just at the moment we have an inability to assess
Correct.
what the gap is between what our kind of our personal gene history is, our personal medical versus what it could be, right?
Correct.
And all we really need is just having just the the information data of our healthcare, our personal health history, kind of presented to the doctor so they can quarterback a little bit better your healthcare journey to, you know, specialists and other care specialists, right?
Well, absolutely. I mean, because the more information that they're given that they have to make a decision on, you know, and using the quarterback analogy, you know, is very good, because if the quarterback hasn't seen, you know, if he's only seen 10 defenses,
Mm-hmm.
and the opponent has 50 different defense setups, then he's only going to know the 10.
Mm-hmm.
And the other 40 that's there, he's not going to know what to do, because he doesn't have the information to help him make the right decision on, you know, how to choose his offense and what play to go with whatever defense they have. And, you know, that's kind of how I look at it with this, with Clover Assistant is it is that disruptive technology. It is that disruptive innovation. It's doing something that's in the same field as, you know, your other big name Medicare companies and healthcare companies. But they're not, the other companies aren't doing what Clover Health Investments is trying to do. And that's where they're going to take off. They're going to go after their, and they already have, they're going after their, you know, lower income people who can't afford normal health care. They're making it or Medicare. They're making it affordable for them. They're gonna it's designed to help lower the cost of medication and pharmaceutical drugs, and it's gonna help the doctor the same way, because I mean, aren't they incentivizing the doctors to use Clover Health right now?
Yes. I mean, well, basically to compensate the doctor for their time, right? Because in
Smart.
order to use Clover Assistant at the point of care, that means that 10-minute doctor visit has to be 15 minutes, right? They just have
Correct.
to add an extra 5 minutes where you're interacting with the Clover Assistant.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the great benefit of this is that, you know, not only do they get compensated for their time to, you know, use the Clover Assistant, but like we mentioned, it gives that second opinion at the
Right.
point of care, and it's integrated with the EHR, you know, electronic health records. So uh, there's actually very a crucial benefit of this, which is that you kind of eliminate medical coding errors. So the physician can kind of fill out the prescription there with Clover Assistant, and then, you know, when you know, office times are over and he can go back home, and they don't need to go back and forth with you know, his secretary or assistant to, you know, do the medical coding and whatnot, to, you know, input everything into the HR. It's already done at the point where you interact with the Clover Assistant. So this is a huge time saver actually in the long run when you look at it from an ecosystem point of view. I think there's also another point that we're kind of missing that's actually kind of crucial too, and it is the fact that the incumbents do try to do they do try to do this as well, which is the second opinion thing, but they do it in like a very abrasive, non-intuitive, and it's a very terrible way, which is that they just deny the claim and they ask the doctor, you know, like, we don't believe that this is necessary, right? And then then the doctor, you know, wastes a lot of time, because all of a sudden it's like,
Right.
oh, okay, we deny the claim. Well, okay, I need to spend 30 minutes just to remember what this patient's, you know, issues were,
Correct.
and then write a response and all that stuff. Like, this is a huge waste of medical knowledge and resources throughout the system, right? And
Exactly.
I mean, I understand where the insurance companies come from. They they're there to protect their financial interests, but it's created a bloat. They justify it because they think that these doctors are out there doing all this fraud practices, right? This is all like, voodoo stuff, but it's really
Right.
not. The key part of this is that if you want good diagnostics, it is fee for service. You can't get around that. Fee for
Nope.
service is where, there's more issues. Obviously, it costs more.
Correct.
But the key thing is there's a rule-based protocol when it comes to precision medicine, which is that you have to follow rules and it's rationalized. If there is if you've gone through all these cheap tests and really you need the more expensive test to find out something that you haven't really locked down in terms of its diagnosis, then you should go ahead and do that, right? And I think that Clover, at least from what I believe, they have an enlightened view on this, which is it costs more in the short term, true, but once you know what the problem is and you can treat it after you know what it is, then it's worth the cost, right?
Of
In the long
course.
run. And so I think just kind of adopting this type of view, I don't think Clover is the only one that's value based in this sense, but they certainly created a technology that helps them be very well positioned to disrupt, like you said,
Right.
which is to bring this high quality level of care, which is personalized precision and evidence based healthcare into the masses. And I think that's going to be disruptive, and that's really
Yeah.
the potential.
Yeah. And I think it's gonna. I mean, it's most certainly gonna happen. They've got all the right stuff. They've got all the right people in place. Fundamentally, the company is strong as hell. I mean, there's no denying that. They went public in January? So was it January?
Yes. Yeah. Well, they
Yeah, by
de-SPACed in January.
de-SPACed. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's only been a half a year, a little over a half a year.
Right.
So for a company, and I understand like a lot of new retail traders have gotten into the market, a lot of them this year, and really haven't had the opportunity to be in a position to be a part of something like this. This is the type of, in my opinion, the type of stock that you want to invest in, put it away, invest in it, put it away. Don't think about it. 10, 15 years from now is when that stock is, you know what I mean? It's going to be, and maybe sooner than that, but it's one of those stocks because of the technology that's involved, because of what they're doing, because of the way that they're positioned. It's going to be one of those stocks that, and you can't just depend on one. You should always diversify in your portfolio anyways, not financial advice, but you should always diversify, but you have to, this way it's not a big deal to invest in a company like this. And 5 years from now, you're like, oh shit, I got Clover Health. Let me look at what that's doing. And then you're like, oh my God, what the hell happened? This is awesome. And because it's happened to me with quite a few stocks actually that I've invested in over the years, but you can't just put all your eggs in one basket, because then you're going to be stressing yourself out too much. You can't wear yourself thin. This is a company that is obviously, everybody has looked at the fundamentals. Everybody has looked at the DD, the due diligence, done their due diligence on the company. We know what it is. And now it's just, let's wait it out through the disruptive innovation. And the way that the company, and that chart that I pulled up earlier, I mean, you have to pay attention to that, man. You can't just expect that in just a couple of months, this company is going to go from zero to hero. It's not going to happen. It doesn't happen in the business world. You know, it took Tesla how many years?
Well, I think I invested in Tesla back in 2012, so it's almost been almost a decade, really.
Right.
Within the public markets, more than a
Right.
decade. Yeah.
So it's you can't you have to expect going into a stock like this, anytime you buy into a new company that's got the software and the AI technology that Clover Health does, you have to go into it 100% with the mindset of it is a long hold. If something happens beforehand, a squeeze or anything like that, which I've never considered and don't even like talking about it, to be honest with you, then that's just
Right.
icing on the cake. But you have to be an investor. There's investors and there's traders. In a stock like this, you have to become an investor because it is the future.
And to be a better investor, this is the reason why I am trying to just educate the community a little bit
100%.
about this framework, right? This disruptive framework. There is because the prediction behind it is actually just based upon that this is what we mean by a company with good fundamentals, right?
Exactly.
It is currently targeting a customer segment where the incumbents will not dare to go in there, right? They won't follow Clover into
Right.
the kind of like the low, like to use your phrase, low hanging fruit, but
Right.
I guess in their eyes, it would be the sicker patients, right?
Yeah, you're low income, you're sicker patients.
Yeah.
You know,
You want to pick in business, there's the rule, the 80-20 rule, which is
yep,
that 80% of your profits come from 20% of your top customers, right?
correct.
Yeah. So you want to select apples, but see, this is the strategy that incumbents use, right? They do the customer surveys to find out, what the customers want. Your customer is always right, and you follow your customers.
Right.
Clover is not necessarily about following customers. It's about the accessibility, the broadening of high quality healthcare. And so by this definition, when we talk about Clover's fundamentals, it is that they cannot be killed if they are successful at managing the health of this sicker population.
Right.
It means, I mean, this is a very, very key fundamental aspect of it, is that if you decide to just be a health insurance company and you want to go after their most profitable customers, they will kill you, right?
Right.
They will price it in a way where it will screw your margins and it will make you
Exactly.
look terrible as a company. Clover intentionally or unintentionally, I don't know, but I guess intentionally go after sicker patients as just a fundamental strategy, and that's what makes them disruptive. And this is actually quite good in a different sense. If you go after the sicker patients, right? Fundamentally what is the sick endemic stuff very, very well, as an insurance
Right.
company within the population. And so if you manage that, then you provide a much bigger levelized value add to society overall, given that your demographic is well, diversified and all that. And to speak to your point about diversity, well, every investor has a pain tolerance, so to speak,
Sure.
when it comes to choosing an entry point, whatnot, and how they assess risk and reward. In terms of, yeah, go ahead. You have a quick
No,
question?
go ahead. No.
And just to speak to that, if you fundamentally know, or if you understand the fundamentals of the company in this way, and it has added to your conviction, then you should size accordingly, but also with a bias towards the more risk averse side, simply because it's a very volatile stock, right? There's a lot of number uncertainty of how this plays out, because as much as I like the company and its principles, what you will see too is that they are growing very, very fast. And it's, I guess, I guess what investors are and what the market is trying to anticipate is, as far as what current price action would be, is just pricing in the risk of if their performance from quarter doesn't yield the evidence that they will succeed in the endeavor of managing the care of sicker patients, right?
Right.
There's just that loaded risk, so to speak. But that is something that investors would have to educate themselves on. I don't think I have fully the answers, but just anecdotally, we've talked about healthcare very broadly, and I think that has yielded some benefit.
I think so too. And I'll tell you, I think that if you're a first time investor in Clover Health,
Mhm.
uh, I believe it's going to make you a better investor for the future, because if this was the first stock that I ever got into, it's whew, it's a doozy, man. I mean, especially if you're, following it day to day and, things like that. But yeah, it's a doozy. And it's definitely, with the amount of information that's come out of this, and the amount, as far as fundamentals and, people doing their due diligence on the company itself, and understanding, the volatility of the stock and why it's volatile, and do we really know why it's volatile, and, what exactly is going on to make it that volatile. They just got a crash course 101 in investing. If this was their first stock to invest in, no doubt, man. But hopefully they can carry this on into the future, into their, future endeavors as far as investing. It's just really important for, us, the ball boys, to make sure, because, I've said it before, we are 100% for retail investors. We are retail investors, and we are 100% for retail investors. We're not going to bring you any technical analysis. Where that's not what we're about. There's other guys out there that can do that. We want to bring you fundamentals of companies. We want to bring you fundamentals of the market itself. We want to bring you information, like this with disruptive innovation, and how they correlate with, companies like Clover Health, and just help you guys be better investors, retail investors for the future. That's why we're here. And Matt, you want to take us out?
Yeah.
Couple last words.
Sure, absolutely. So, disruptive innovation is one lens and one theoretical framework in which you can, judge and assess the strength of your position as the company goes forward. Because like with any framework, it has a predictive value, and whatever whatever price action is, what you are looking for is just the long term, and by adopting this framework, you can kind of see where this company that you're invested in, it doesn't necessarily have to be Clover, but you adopt it in for any company really, and just that's one way to fundamentally assess the success rate of how disruptors end up disrupting, right? It's to kind of recategorize the problem of that disruption isn't necessarily just about a company goes in, crashes everything, and wins, right? It's sometimes about just doing the small things right.
Correct.
Yeah,
Correct.
that's it.
Well, that is awesome, Matt. I want to thank you for stopping by, Mr. Matt G, coming by and enlightening us on disruptive innovation. And I hope this helps, you guys that watch this on, basically give you some new knowledge. I would highly recommend going out and picking up Clayton Christensen's book, his latest book as well. It's just good to educate yourself on what's going on. Don't rely on everybody else to bring you the information that you can go out and seek for yourself. So that way you can make the best decisions financially for yourself in the future. But other than that, Matt, thank you for stopping by, and I want to thank everybody for watching.
It's been a pleasure.
See ya.
Thank you very much.